And I just want to make sure that we are good. We are good and we are live. So, hello, everybody. This is your girl, Dr. Rhonda M. Lawson. And I just want to thank you all for joining us for what is about a really important and a very lively conversation. And I don't mean lively in a way where we're going to be fighting with each other, because we're going to be approaching this conversation with love. So I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. If you want to be a part of the conversation, I ask you to go ahead and share. And ladies, you can do the same if you like. If you go to the Meet the World Image Solutions Facebook page, you can share the live to your own pages. And I see our people already have done so, which is cool. And so what we want to do is make conversation as interactive as possible. Because this we're going to be talking about a really what we want to do is some people can be a really hurtful conversation. Oh, ladies, is it if this we're going to be talking on your phone or on another computer, you may have to mute it. So just giving us a little bit of feedback. Awesome, awesome. But I know for some people this can be a very hurtful conversation, but we want to be able to approach this with love and understanding. And for some people, it's a sad thing because we're still, even in this day and age, we're discussing about something that that affects us in nearly everything that we do. So I have a panel here of a really diverse panel here of some really amazing ladies. And before we go too far into the discussion, I would love it if each of the ladies would introduce themselves. And Shira, we'll go ahead and start with you because you're right next to me on the screen.
Thank you, Dr. Lawson. My name is Shira Phillips. I am an educator, artist, writer, poet, performance artist, organizer, community activist, and very excited to be here with these lovely people this evening.
Thank you so much. Dr. Devana?
Hi, I'm Dr. Devana Stalnaker Schaffner, she, her pronouns. I am an associate professor at Antioch University, New England, as well as being associate chair of the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Department. I'm also a licensed professional counselor with 20 years of experience working with individuals and couples.
Awesome. And Frenchie?
Good evening, everyone. I apologize in advance for not having my camera on. I'm experiencing some physical difficulties. However, I am a mental health professional, social services specialist that currently works with the Department of the Army, and I'm also an author, an advocate, and an activist. And I am so pleased to be here tonight with all these beautiful ladies, and I appreciate you, Dr. Lawson, for helping us to have this courageous conversation on colorism.
Thank you so much. And Sharon?
Good evening. I am Sharon Mason. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am an author. I am a publisher, mentor, and just happy to be here and engage in this very important conversation.
Absolutely. Dr. Jackie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jackie, you, she, her pronouns. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, certified group psychotherapist, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. And Dr. Felicia?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Felicia Young. I'm the owner of Higher Minds of Education, where I help young people complete college applications as well as find scholarships and make sure that their financial aid is done correctly. I'm excited to have this conversation. I work with young people every day who experience colorism on varying levels, so I was excited to be invited to the panel. Thank you, Dr. Rhonda.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Rhonda Lawson. I am the owner of Meet the World Image Solutions, which is a publicity and literary services company. And my doctorate was actually in organizational leadership, but my dissertation was on the myth of every Black woman and how it affects African American female leaders. And in my research, there were some ladies who brought up colorism and how they are often judged, not as much on the, well, not just on the color of their skin, but also on the shade of their skin. So and then I'm seeing that it often affects us in so many different ways, whether it's in a professional setting, whether it's in a personal setting, or in interpersonal relationships. So it's a conversation that we need to have. And as I mentioned, I want to be able to approach this conversation in love. But before we get started, Dr. Devana, can you read that definition of colorism? Because I think sometimes we get colorism mixed up with racism, which gets mixed up with classism sometimes. So I really would like us to focus on what colorism is.
Sure. Thank you. It is the practice of discrimination by which those with lighter skin are more favorably treated than those with darker skin. And I think it's important also to differentiate colorism from racism, as you mentioned, that colorism is something that happens within the group, and racism is something that happens between groups, specifically dominant culture over minoritized, historically minoritized and disenfranchised individuals.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that or a comment on that?
Only that I would only add that colorism, I think today has extended itself to include reverse colorism, and it's been, as was mentioned before we started the call, a source of trauma for so many, and not just um, women within our community that are of a darker shade. As you mentioned earlier, Dr. Lawson, when you were doing your interviews for your dissertation, how women of different shades have spoken to something like colorism. So I'm just excited that we're having this conversation and being inclusive in what that definition may mean today.
And I would also add that the proximity to whiteness is also linked to our proximity to humanity and our access to healthcare and other things that we need to survive and thrive in the world. So yeah, I would like to add that.
Thank you for adding that. And Shira, I'd like to stay with you for a second. When we were talking earlier, you mentioned New Orleans, because New Orleans has some deep, painful roots when it comes to colorism. Even now, in the seventh ward of New Orleans, there is still a large population of lighter skinned people living in New Orleans, or living in the seventh ward, because that was where they all lived back in those days, back in the days. If you Can you talk a little bit more about it? And Dr. Divina, I know um, being from New Orleans as well, you could probably touch on that as well.
Yes, well, the quadroon and the octoroon and other political designations. New Orleans had about 15 or more racial political designations, and those political designations determined whether or not you were able to move freely about the city. And so, some people had more access based off of the way they looked, based off of their proximity to whiteness.
And to add to that, there's anecdotal information around the stories that my mom used to tell me about the autocrat club, and that in
Yes.
order to access the autocrat club, you had to pass the brown bag test, which means you had to be lighter than a brown bag, or that you had to also pass the fine tooth comb test, which meant your hair needed to be able to pass through a fine tooth comb. So I I grew up in New Orleans. I grew up steeped in colorism. I loathed myself for a long time because of colorism, because I wasn't lighter skinned and not having long, luxurious, wavy, curly hair and things like that. So I have struggled with that personally from that perspective of not feeling good enough because I wasn't light enough.
Now, I know for a number of us, we may have gone through a or pain that we're not pretty enough, or thinking that somebody is pretty because they're lighter skinned. And would would you venture to say that this is a pain that's maybe on both sides of the
I would say so, yes. Be- I would say that it's definitely something that darker skinned people experience as well as lighter skin. I know that we were talking earlier about some traumas that have been inflicted upon some of the lighter skinned panelists and their experiences with being targeted for the because of the color of their skin, because they were lighter. I experienced it because I wasn't dark enough. And funny enough, when I relocated from from New Orleans to Atlanta, I was called Redbone here for the first time in my life. So I guess it all is relative. But in New Orleans, I definitely was not light enough.
I was gonna say when you were speaking earlier, I was gonna say where I'm from, you would have definitely been of the lighter complected group. So it's so interesting, like geographically and regionally, how we experience colorism differently.
Hmm.
Dr. Felicia, were you about to say something?
I was.
Okay.
Just it depends on where you are in the country. I have friends who live on the West Coast, and being a dark skinned girl is not the thing to be. And when you go to South, being chocolate is the thing to be. So it just kind of depends on what city and what area of the land that you're in. Because you'll meet people who are the most beautiful women you've ever seen in your life, dark as coal, and they think that they're ugly, just
Yeah.
by the family that they grew up in or the environment in which they grew.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends. I agree with that.
And Dr. Felicia, to your point about the West Coast, a lot of people from New Orleans and from the South migrated to the West Coast and brought those values with them. So I would say places like LA are steeped in colorism as well.
Right,
Definitely.
It
because colorism is what is the gold standard always changes based on what society says is the gold standard. So
Right. At the
right
time.
now, like pale and light was like super white was the gold standard. Now it's like, well, we want to look a little um, racially ambiguous, and
Hmm.
that's news trend. Which who knows will be 50 years from now. So that's the system of colorism is that it is something that's based off of something that society kind of dictates what is considered beautiful or acceptable by the culture. And that can change depending on if you're United States, if you're in South America, if you're in Europe, if you're in the continent of Africa. So that's this what's so fickle about this is that the system just keeps moving the goalposts.
and it can depend on gender, right? Because I am from
Mm-hmm.
the West Coast. I'm actually from Washington State, and so when um, maybe darker complected black men were in Washington, all the women wanted the darker complected men there. Um, and it was maybe because there were so many light skinned men living on the West Coast that it was something that it was almost like, I don't want to say a forbidden fruit, but I think about forbidden fruit when I think about maybe even Southern men who were in the military that came up north, came up to Washington, and it was like, oh, I finally can date outside my race, or I can date lighter skinned women, and my family, isn't around to disapprove. So it's like you said, it just depends. There's all these different variables.
Hmm.
And I also want to add to that in the conversations that I've had around this sensitive issue and the workshops that I've done, I've heard men say things like they were called soft and they were often targeted and had to fight because they were perceived as soft because they were lighter skinned.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we still see that now, where you'll see lion considered think Drake. He's always considered soft because and I don't know if it's because of his light skin or
He wants to sing.
because of the
Yeah.
music.
Combination of both.
Yeah, because
Right.
It's because it's from the
Social
Bronx.
media.
That's why.
Yeah.
It's
The
from
role the
Canada.
media plays in all of that.
yeah, it's all of the above.
Yeah. Yeah, the
And
role the
also,
media plays.
they were like one person I'm thinking of in particular also mentioned how he was called the white man. He was called white and ostracized from his community of all black community and people displaced their anger for white people onto him.
Hmm. And it's important that you mention that, Shira, because we have to think about how colorism is steeped in white supremacist ideology and Eurocentric values when it comes to standards of beauty.
Yes.
And those are that is the barometer, that's the benchmark that we measure colorism by because of the introduction of white supremacist ideology.
And I mentioned that a little earlier. When I was talking about the movie, and when they were casting for the movie and they were looking for women to be extras, and they had basically the class A down to the class D, and the class A was the light skin with the long hair, the slim body, but the class D was the darker skinned girls with the short hair. Even though they may be as beautiful or even more beautiful than the light skinned person, they were not considered the class A at that time. And granted, that they may have been for a movie, and maybe the characters in the movie felt that way. But the fact that this was leaked and many people saw it, it brought back a lot of pain for a lot of people, light skinned or dark skinned.
Mhm.
But that has a lot to do with how media shapes the things that we think are beautiful.
Media.
So just like with that leaked email,
Mm-hmm.
there's something to say about how media can influence the things that we think are right, the things that we think are wrong or beautiful or not. Media plays a big role in that. And so that's why children having such access to social media, music videos, music, they talk about a light skinned, green eyed girl, and so if
Right.
there's no mention of a dark skinned, beautiful girl, I mean, so how do you identify as a young girl to this is beauty based on a rapper that I like? Maybe
Right.
I'm not beautiful enough. So that kind of starts to create a negative thought process.
And
Yeah,
And
and
I
I think
think
about
Sharon,
the influence that
oh, I was just about to point to you, Sharon. Because I wanted to talk a bit about the book that you're working on as well, but I'll let you finish your point.
yeah, so thinking about just the number of different influences that our children have, and oftentimes we think that okay, their main influence is coming from within this house. But when we have conversations, we'll learn that, of course, the folks that they go to school with, other family members, um, they get it from everywhere. And so we have to continue to have these conversations because it's not only what it is that we're pouring inside of them. And so within, well, actually, there's actually two books. So I didn't even share because I know we're going to get into the part around the hair. So the first book is, and I'm just going to hold it up so if you guys can see it. The first book is This is Good Hair because it's all good hair. So trying to shut down that good hair versus bad hair thing. And so with this young lady, she's getting ready for picture day. And her mother asks her, she says, well, how would you like me to do your hair? And she hesitates and she says, well, make it like good hair. And it really takes her mother aback because it's like, where did you hear that? So come to find out, she heard out about it. The girl in gymnastics that says that good hair doesn't poof up during practice, and then the cousin says that you're going to need a perm soon, and then the grandmother says you didn't get your hair from our side of the family because we all have good hair. And so the mother has to have this conversation with her daughter due to all these influences. So that's that one. The other book is No Shade Here, Baby. You know, it's kind of strange when you're holding it up. Now, this young lady, she's visiting her cousin. She's gone to a whole nother state and she's visiting her cousin, but she does not want to play outside because the sun is out and she doesn't want to get darker. She doesn't want her complexion to get darker. And so they have to have this conversation around, oh, we're going to have us some fun. And so the other young lady shares that, well, my mother's lighter, she's beautiful. My grandmother's darker, she's beautiful. I can't lose, So they're having these conversations and it makes her address it. And then the girl realizes, well, I have people in my family that are all shades. They all love me. I love all of them. And I don't want to be so impacted by how others view me, these kids at school that are throwing shade. So it plays on shade in all those different ways, the shade of your skin, the shade, when you're not in the sun, and then throwing shade. But we have to continue to have these conversations because if not, we've had this one conversation and it's like, okay, you're good. No, absolutely not. somebody said this and now I'm impacted this way. So now I don't want mommy's complexion. I want this person's complexion, or I don't want my own complexion. I want this complexion. And so continue to pour in those messages in, having conversations, challenging things that they may have heard on a regular basis. And that's why I like to write. And I think I'm a kid at heart, probably the biggest kid, but having those conversations and writing from a place to where let's see what's really going on and what we need to discuss. Because please don't give my age and have these things that you're still struggling with. And so now here you are in front of a therapist such as myself, trying to challenge these things that can be extremely difficult. Yeah. If it's not broken, we don't necessarily have to fix it. So it's easier to be proactive. And that's what I'm trying to support families, schools in doing.
It's really important that we do talk about this. And I've heard people say that they don't like these conversations to be had in public because these are Black people's problems and we need to keep them in the house. But in this day of social media, how do we have these conversations without them being out in the public?
Well, honestly, I think that it is a conversation that needs to happen out in the public because, um, to Sharon's point, I do believe that the reinforcement for positive self efficacy starts in the home, right? And we have to be very careful not to allow our traumas to impact our children by either not having the conversation or by projecting our traumas onto our children, right? We need to be building their self efficacy so that they can be secure in who they are and how they look. And we have to start that very early. Um, but I think that there are, of course, young people as well as adults who haven't had the opportunity to have that reinforcement. And that's another reason why these conversations out in the open are necessary.
Well, one thing I wanted to share is that I had a student.
Dr. Jackie was waiting to say something. I just want to give her a moment.
Oh, I was leaving the student part, but I also want to say this is that we need to dismantle the myth that this is just a Black person issue, because this is not
Right.
just a Black person issue. It's not even just a BIPOC or POC issue. It's an universal issue. Every culture has been impacted by colorism. And so if we have these conversations out in the open, you'll be like, oh, wait, I have that experience too, or I have that experience too. And it didn't matter of the race. It's like it's the system of control of saying you need to alter your skin color in order to get to what society has said is beautiful and or has the most power. And if you get that, it's like a survival technique. Look, if you get access to more education, more funds, better jobs, better living opportunities, you're going to try to do what you can to get that access. And that's felt any type of culture that experiences oppression or marginalization has had that experience. So I think that myth of like, oh, it's only a Black person issue, we got to keep it in the house. No, it's a universal issue. And we need to have a really big conversation about how colorism has just, as I said before, one time I said before, it's just like the undercurrent. And I'll stick with America. In America, it just is there and it's
It's
prominent.
But
it's
it's
tied
very
to
true.
shame. It's tied to shame.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's very true because it happens in Asian culture as well.
Let's
So
talk
the
about
closer
the
you are to white,
multi-million-dollar
right.
industry over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean they have a light skin, what is it? The lightning
The skin
cream.
lightening cream. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
And
It's very popular.
don't forget about the crease in the eyes. That's actually a big thing too. There were actually people who were trying to get surgery to get rid of that crease in the eyes so they could look more white and look more
Yeah.
American.
Yeah.
I also think the conversation needs to be had collectively and openly because the messages of anti-Blackness are definitely open. They're not, sometimes they happen in silos, but it's definitely a covert and an overt message to Black people. And also, I was going to share that I had a student who would come to me and cry because people were making fun of her because of her lips. And months later, she was found in the bathroom giving fellatio to one of the young boys who was teasing her about her lips. And so I do believe and feel that the impacts of this is very, very deeply, is horrible impact on our children and subsequently our adults as well. our self value and our self worth and our desire to be accepted and to be loved and to be cared for and to belong.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend, and we were discussing how sometimes it's not necessarily what's said, but sometimes it's what isn't said. So if you've got, and I'll just say young ladies, if you've got two young ladies, and I am always complimenting this one, oh, you're beautiful, you're this, you're that, and I'm affirming, however, I'm not the other, then it's what is it about me that I don't get that? And so sometimes we have to be careful in that, because it's not that you told me that I was ugly or that I wasn't beautiful. However, you are lathering this other person with all of these affirming messages. And what is it? Oh, we're a different skin complexion. Oh, is this? Oh, is that? And so just to be mindful of how it is that we impact those who are in our care, those who are in our presence, because it can be felt, it can be experienced, and it can be negative. And everyone wants to be loved and accepted, and we have that thing of, oh, you need to have that thing internally. Well, absolutely, we have to have it internally, but it's from the outside that we receive it, and so we're trying to pour it inside, but meanwhile we can be very mindful of how it is that we're engaging with those who are within our care.
Um,
I
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say
Mhm.
I definitely agree with that, and I've seen it on both sides of the spectrum. I have seen, like, my daughter is the same complexion as I am, maybe even a little bit lighter, but she's actually full black, besides a quarter of, Hispanic. And I have seen where people, and this kind of ties back into what you were saying earlier, Dr. Lawson, about what is it? Is it really colorism or could it be something else? Because I've seen people isolate her or not want her to have certain attention because of maybe a hyper vigilance about her getting attention when maybe she earned it, and
Mhm.
I've also seen where we will isolate each other based off of our own trauma and our own projections. And so we have to find a way to have balance, to be secure within ourselves so that we can be secure collectively and not isolate or harm each other.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. Now, I wanted to touch on a little bit um, about the popularity colorism has received in popular media. It's been kind of a buzzword, and I really feel like maybe if they had heard some of this conversation, maybe some of those comments wouldn't have been made. But it's been a kind of, especially in the reality TV world. I mean, I've seen it mentioned on Real Housewives of Atlanta, Real Housewives of Potomac. I've heard it in Basketball Wives. Um, do you think that that's actually helped to bring to kind of bring the conversation a little bit more live, or that we're actually talking about it more?
Oh, okay. I think it's helpful in bringing people who want to talk about it actually dismantles it, to come up with solutions, to have platforms to jump on it like this one to talk about it. Um, but I also know that TV and media and how systems work is all about conflict and sales, right? It's not like, oh, it's a fight. Yeah, who cares about color? It's a fight. We'll promote that, and people are talking about the fight. And if someone grabs to the colorism comment, then they have these great conversations. So
Mhm.
I'm always questioning um, when it comes to stuff like that, TV shows specifically, like what's the intentionality behind that? Knowing that at the end of the day, certain TV shows are just here to make their business. No shade, no disrespect. It's a business. And so the more views you get, the more commercials you can buy, the more business you get. Same thing with, the performative nature of beauty products and filters and social media stuff. Like, what's the intentionality? Are you expanding your brand because you genuinely want to make sure every person who wants to wear makeup can find their shade and tone? Or
Mhm.
are you doing it because you realize Fenty is a multi-billion-dollar company and you're like, hey, I also want a piece of that pie? So I think it goes back to the intentionality, because this is just a system like classism, racism, ableism, and people will milk it for what it's worth if we allow them to.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, you're right. The more they make these types of comments, or it's on TV, the more people are going to talk about it, and it gives life to the show. More people are going to watch because they either support it or they hate it, but they want to see what's going to happen next. Shira, I think you're on mute.
I also feel like people's perspective, wherever they are, is important because we can learn so much from people's perspective. But we also need to be careful that we're listening to people who are actually studying this, or who are articulating these things in the appropriate way, because misinformation can really be harmful to us.
Absolutely. And I think somebody actually in the comments mentioned that a little bit earlier, that misinformation is harmful. And so it's important for us to do our own research. Okay.
Which means that
Okay.
institutions, scholars, academic houses, publishing houses need to be able to fund and publish this research. Oftentimes, this doesn't get through to the academic side. When I was doing my dissertation, I had to look in so many other articles other than psychology to find the research I needed to talk about what I wanted to talk about. I'm like, I know it's here, but the data's not there to show it. And I wonder why. So absolutely, it's hard to have those conversations, though, based on academic research if the research isn't allowed to take place. So just want to plug out there, whoever's want to do research, here you go.
Yes, it's absolutely something that does need to be researched. And I'll tell you that, and those of you who have gone through the doctoral program, when you're doing any type of research and it has a bit of race in it, it's dismissed as race-based, and often it's harder to get that subject approved. And so you have to stand 10 down in what you believe in, and what you're trying to add to the pool of knowledge, or to the body of knowledge, in order for it to even be accepted for you to move on in the dissertation process.
Okay. You're absolutely right, Dr. Lawson. I mean, when I did my dissertation on single mothers' persistency in a community college, there was just not a space for me just to focus on Black and brown mothers. There was not a ton of research, so it was just best if I was more general in my research to get it done. But there is a lot of, as Dr. Darby, I don't have my glasses on, stated earlier, that there needs to be data out there for us to be able to research these things and be able to have more dissertations, more conversations about colorism. It's just, but as you stated, it's just not there.
Now, I did want to, unless anybody had another comment, I did want to bring.
Just to say that that's intentional. The system works the way it was designed to work. And when we talk about dismantling isms, we have to dismantle them in all systems. And research is one of those systems. Academia is one of those systems. So the system is working the way it was set up to work. And that's why it's incumbent upon viewers who are watching us and us ourselves to do the research that we need to do to put it out there, and to get this phenomenon explored and discussed more openly.
Yeah. And that's why I was so excited when all of you agreed to be a part of this conversation, because it's a conversation that needs to be had, because there is so much pain that goes on when it comes to colorism. And our young girls who are growing up, and even adults who have grown up, feeling that they're not as pretty, or they're not as smart, or often sometimes the darker skinned person may get the negative stereotype when it comes to Black women. For instance, and I know that this lady did not think that she was insulting me, but she was. When I was in the Army, a lady, all she saw was a picture of me, and she knew that I was the editor of the base newspaper. And she looked at my picture and she said, "Oh, she looks tough." And I'm like, what about my picture made me look tough? And so it made me wonder, does she think that I look tough because I'm Black? Does she think that I look tough because I'm a darker skinned person? And so often we don't. Other people don't have to have these conversations with themselves to wonder what somebody's motivation is for making certain comments.
I think it speaks to the demonization of people and the fetishization of people, depending on what spectrum and depending on what perspective you're coming at this from. So, um, for unfortunately, usually depending on the person's perspective, it usually is darker people who get demonized, but they can also be fetishized too, based on someone lighter thinking, oh, someone darker is more attractive.
Yes, absolutely. Now, before we go on, I do know we had a lady who wanted to she wanted to be able to address the panel in person and make a comment. So I'm going to bring her on. Joyce, look at the camera. Okay, I'm about to bring you on.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi,
In
Joyce.
case what's that Dr. Lawson didn't tell you, my name is Joyce Jennings, and as you can see, I'm a light-skinned black woman trapped in what's that? I'm a black woman trapped in a light-skinned woman's body. I am not trusted by either side. Some people perceive, some white people, I should say, perceive that I should be on the same page with them, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. Some black people are committed to finding and creating falsehood situations so they were to justify not accepting me and want to persuade others to do the same. All I ask, if you don't like me, that's your choice, but just leave me alone. That's all I ask. Okay. And also, these people that I'm talking about, they never met my parents, siblings, or nothing. They're basing it on what they see. I've got it from the white people, I've got it from the black people. All right, where I have been shunned by both. And I'm like, baby, I haven't done nothing to you. I don't know you. Okay? So why are you treating me so badly? And the answer to your question that you said earlier, it's it's basically how they were reared. If they were reared to, oh, you don't like light skinned black people. Okay, I've had that to happen to me.
I want to speak to that. So,
I can barely hear you. Could you speak up?
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I want to
Yeah,
speak to
okay.
that because
Joyce, I'm gonna put you on mute so we'll be able to hear. I think that was Frenchie was about to make her comment, so I'm just put you on mute.
yes, thank you. So I do want to speak to that because I can definitely relate to my soror. I'm going to just call her my soror, Joyce Jones, because you know, and I have to say I'm probably going to be hesitant in what I say because I've had situations where um, my brown skinned sorors, or not sorors, excuse me, sisters have they have basically said to me, how could you know what I've experienced, in a way to kind of negate my experience? But I can say that I can relate to Miss Jones because I too have kind of been caught in an awkward space, right? I do identify as a black woman. I carry myself as a black woman. I was raised by a black woman. Um, as they say on what is that, the girl trick, right? I am the daughter of Linda Diane Baum, who is a black woman, and I'm made in her image. But people don't see me that way, right? And I have been looked at as a competition, a competitor that I may not have actually been. I have been looked at as someone who could not be an ally. And on the other side, as Miss Jones mentioned, some of my lighter complected friends to white friends have thought that they could be completely comfortable saying certain things in my presence because, of course, the way I present to the world with my skin, I must have their views. And it has put me in very uncomfortable spaces, because I'm always advocating for Black people. I'm always advocating for Black women. However, I will say that I have suffered a great deal of hurt at the hands of other Black women. And hurt people. And that's how I kind of look at it. We've had this legacy, this history of trauma, and what I see is a lot of projection. In some organizations that I belong to, what I've seen recently is a movement to push forward or propel a certain type of looking woman, Black woman, and by doing that, in a way, they're doing the very same things to lighter complected women, Black women, that was done to them. And it's hurtful. It's kind of like, I have no
I think we lost Frenchie.
Well, I can share until she comes back.
Mhm.
I, being a product of an interracial couple, definitely had some experiences growing up and even in my adulthood where my hair has been cut behind my back. People have stuck things in my hair in order for them to get, stuck and for me to have to cut them out. I've had it set on fire. I've been in fights where people have said to me, I don't like you. I want to fight you because you are lighter than me or because your hair is looser than mine. I've been bombarded at different points in times with people, saying they love my hair and how it's good hair, and it definitely makes me feel shame and guilt. And my mom is a dark skinned woman, and she shared with me the things that she's gone through growing up, and I have an overwhelming empathy and compassion, and I will say that I cannot say that I know her experience, and I also will say that there are other light skinned women who probably perpetuate this, who are mean and who are unaccepting. But I know that I have also had experience where my identity and my belonging to a group has been invalidated, and that has definitely impacted me very deeply.
Dr. Devana?
Yeah, I was just going to say that again, the system is working the way it was designed to work to keep us separate. That's why this conversation is so important, to pit us against each other, to have us fighting within our race and fighting each other, because if we're doing that, then we're not focused on the real enemy or the real target, which is systemic racism, which is systemic oppression, which all of these systems need to be deconstructed and dismantled. So the idea is to keep us fighting and warring within our race.
Absolutely. And the sad part is um, that is one of the reasons why colorism existed, because it was this class system, and we still go back to the whole house Negro and the field Negro, and all that does is really cause more fighting within us, where one thinks that you think you're better than me, and well, you think you're better than me, and we start the same things that we argue about when it comes to racism. We argue about when it comes to colorism.
Yeah, I always say that colorism is the sibling of racism,
Yes.
because it is a way to say you can't get absolute power, but I find a way for you to get close to it. And so again, you're saying if we can have the fighting in between, then you don't focus on who actually has the power in the space. And so it can occur by itself, but also usually most time occurs with its sibling racism.
Now, Frenchie, I know you got cut off while you were talking. Were you able to finish your statement?
No, but that's okay, because listening to the conversation, I see the direction that it went in. I just I would just say it's an emotionally triggering um thing for me, because I mentioned earlier before we started this call that my mother, who also struggled with her identity and her complexion, her color, she early on projected her hurts and her pains onto me. Um, Many people here have probably seen the movie The Imitation of Life,
Mhm.
where you have the lighter complected daughter, darker complected mother, and the daughter basically wants to pass so that she doesn't have to live the life of her mother or the life that her mother lived. And when I was very young, my mom made it a point to make sure that I watched that movie over and over and over again so that it would be ingrained in me that I was still a black woman, regardless of whether I had lighter skin or not, and that I should always remember never to deny my blackness. But in doing so, it also hurt me, right? It also gave me complexes. And so a lot of times when we think about colorism, and especially as the way it's traditionally defined, we think about, like I said, our darker complected sisters and how it affected them. We don't always think about how it affects, because back when I was born, it was kind of taboo to have mixed children. Um, and we don't talk about how the effects of colorism affected these children that were, lighter complected or, mixed race. And I hesitate to say all of this because I know the plight of my sisters of a darker hue, and so I hesitate to say it because I don't want to take anything away from their experience. But I think that we have to recognize that collectively this has been our experience, right? And we're responsible for healing and we're responsible for fixing it. And so we do have to have these conversations. We do have to share both sides so that we can come to a solution. How do we fix this? How do we change this so that we're not passing these things on to our daughters?
I thank you
Well,
for restating that point, because I believe that's part of what our sister Joyce was trying to say earlier, where assumption had been her because she was lighter skinned, and or people have treated her a certain way because she was lighter skinned, and that's why I feel that that's why I named this entire discussion, is it a wound that will never heal? Because people both sides of the issue are hurt by colorism. So we don't really resolve anything by throwing the word at each other. But we have to make sure that we're understanding what colorism is and what it was meant to do to our communities.
appreciate that, Dr. Lawson. Thinking about how everybody's got different experiences and just having this format in order that we can come together and just talk about it. Because oftentimes it's, I believe that this is what this person's experience is, but until we have conversations and we listen, we have no clue what the next person's experience is. And so I am just gleaning from each and every lady that's here, from the experiences, and just happy that you put this out there because I'm seeing the comments that are also going across the screen. And so uh, people are watching, people are saying they're
Yes,
going to share. And I believe that the conversation is going to continue to take place. So this isn't it. Um, and I'm grateful and thankful for the respect that's being extended, that everyone's getting the floor. So just wanted to put that out there because I'll forget, that menopause thing kicks in and I forget. So I just want to put that out there that I'm grateful and thankful for each and every one of you for sharing pieces of your stories. I mean, I know that that's just the beginning for everybody, but just pieces of your stories. And that vulnerability. Oh goodness, just even as folks are being vulnerable, so I pray that everyone is really good to yourselves when you get off of here, because this can impact you just in sharing.
absolutely. Thank you
Dr.
for that.
Rhonda,
Yes,
if
ma'am.
I could say something, this, in my opinion, at this point, this is where gentle parenting comes in. Um, and is actually helpful at this point because traditionally, in my family, being a majority Black family, like these types of things aren't discussed. Whatever someone says to you, they have said it to you. Whether your feelings are hurt or not, it
Mhm.
does not matter. But now with the new gentle parenting and giving children the option to say how they feel and express their feelings, I think that a lot of issues can be discussed now more openly than in past situations because whatever is said is just said in a black house. Like it's over with. My grandmother would say something, and she just passed away maybe a month or two ago. And at her funeral, my uncle said that if you came into that house, you got talked about. I mean, your feelings were hurt. I mean, and it was a joke, but it's not a joke because and their feelings are actually hurt, and it alters who they are as a person. So I mean, having little jokes about you being dark or being too light or your hair being nappy or these jokes have
Right.
the effect on children that you don't really think about as they grow into adulthood. So I think like me being a parent of a 10 and a 3-year old, that is a conversation that we have. If I could share a story about my son,
Yes.
he's 10. And so I was teasing him about a little girl he likes. And I was like, Jacob, so show me the little girl that you like. And so he said to me, Mommy, I don't see any pretty brown girls. So we live in a mixed environment. But to say I see pretty little brown girls all day when I'm picking you up from school. So I started making a habit of pointing out the pretty brown girls. So he
Yes.
would know this is what a pretty brown girl looks like because you have
Absolutely.
right, you have sisters and a mom and a grandmother, so having a conversation with the little boys as well, because we have men who grow up who only want to date exotic women who are light skinned, what we consider good hair and green eyes and that sort of thing. So I think having those conversations with the children is a good thing.
I
It
agree.
is very. I'm sorry. Somebody was about to say something.
No, I was gonna say I agree. I have two grown sons, and I do think having the conversation. And my daughter, my daughter should have been on this call, okay? Because she is truly an advocate for anything against colorism, pretty privilege, all of that. But I was gonna say that I had to have a conversation with my sons too. But one of the things that I found out, and my lens would have kind of skewed my view on why they were picking certain girls based off of my life experiences. However, once I had this conversation with them, they opened my eyes to something that I had never thought about. They told me, they said, Mom, they said the African American girls, they don't like me. They don't like us.
Mm.
We're not cool enough. We're too here goes this conversation about the men and how they're treated when it comes to colorism, right? Or even just how they're stereotyped. They told me, well, they think we're too white acting. They think that we're too proper, that we're not hood enough. And I had never thought about it. In my mind, through my lens, from my life experiences, I was just saying, oh, y'all think these girls are better than black girls, right? This is how you see this? But when they told me, no, we really want to date black women, but black women don't find us attractive or they don't think we're cool enough. It really opened my
Mhm.
eyes. And I think it speaks back to what you were saying earlier, Rhonda, that sometimes, we may perceive that it's this, but it may be something else.
Yeah, man, we could talk so much longer about this. I mean, first of all, I can't believe Frenchie and I have two grown kids. Our kids grew up together. Now they're grown. I can't believe that. But it is a conversation to have with our children because we don't want them to grow up with the hurt. I mean, being from New Orleans, I mean, I went through it as well, where people would think, or people actually in my family thought that the lighter skinned people were prettier than the darker skinned people. We laugh and we make about some of were said when we were younger, but we know that the hurt was still there. We know that we had to grow up and learn to be beautiful because we weren't as light skinned as some of the other people that we would see in New Orleans. I remember one one girl saying one time, everybody says she's pretty because she's light skinned, but she really is ugly. you know, but
That
those
happens a lot.
were, what did you say, Felicia?
I said that happens a lot when you
Yeah,
hear people say somebody is beautiful just because of whatever their skin tone is. Yeah.
right. And I mean, and the other way around, we've seen darker skinned women be called ugly because they're darker skinned. Um, I think probably in the last 10, 15 years, we finally decided that darker skinned men were beautiful. And now we all love darker skinned men and we don't like the light skinned men. It's, unfortunately, that light skin, dark skin thing still happens even in this day and age, even as we're learning that the term is hurtful, that the practice of colorism is hurtful. We're still having to have these conversations because there are still people who practice it. So I do see that we're going to have a part two to this conversation, though, because it's almost 8 o'clock.
But Rhonda, I have one question before we go, before you
Okay.
have to wrap everything up. So as we leave this very informative session, what do we do as we leave here? This is probably a question for the therapist on the line. Like, what do we do, as we move forward? As I move into the world and I see a Black woman on the street and I tell her I love her shoes, like, do I tell her I love her skin tone too? Like, how do we, make this a better situation as we move forward?
I would thank you, Dr. Felicia, because I did want to ask that question as we went around the room. So because you posed the question,
I don't know.
I would love. I just still want your thoughts. I mean, because I do want to go around the room because I think everybody has a different perspective as to what we can do about this, or how we can get better. Because just talking about it is not going to solve it. We need to have ways that we can actually heal from this. So I would like your opinion on it, but at the same time, once you're finished, let us know how we can reach you.
Okay. So as an educator, I think reaching young people very early on, providing information, books, conversations like this, just for them to be able to know that as adults, we are still dealing with these issues as well. It's not something that they are only dealing with on social media or in their friendship groups. So I just think information, good information, is the way to help young people be able to battle this as they battle colorism as well as racism in the world that we live in today. And I can be reached in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Higher Minds of Education is my company. Like I said, I help students with college and career readiness. I work with students all over the United States, assisting with FAFSA as well as scholarships. And I supposed to give my phone number too?
If you want to, I
Email.
put your website in the
I
chat.
need the memo. And I can be reached at hmofed.com. That's my website for Higher Minds of Education. And it was such a joy to be on with you guys. Thank you for sharing your stories. I enjoyed listening. I enjoyed sharing. I think this is a very needed topic. And so I can't wait until part two. Hopefully we all get on to part two.
Shira?
Yes, thank you so much. I think we have to be observant of ourselves, our thoughts, our behaviors, listening to ourselves, and being aware of how this programming has affected us and impacted us. I think we have to be able to correct ourselves when we see that we're doing something that's counterproductive in this manner, and that we be brave enough to correct others when we hear them say things that
Yes.
are harmful. And also, support one another. Use our positioning, and if we can, to support and elevate those who may be less visible. Those are some things I think that we can do. These conversations, I think, are very important in order for us to be able to have to expand our consciousness and have more compassion and more empathy for one another.
Okay, thank you, Shira.
Where you can reach
Yes.
me at. I'm on Facebook at she space raw, and then on Instagram I am _she _raw.
Okay, I was gonna type that in the chat, but I lost track.
I got it. I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Devana.
Well, that's hard to follow Shira's beautiful and eloquent response, and I wholeheartedly agree and amen everything that you said. Um, I think my comment is as a mental health professional is considering the mental health and mental wellness of Black women and Black men that come into counseling. That this is an issue that needs to be discussed and explored in counseling. We need to be able to assess for it. We need to be able to have conversations, and we need to be able to dismantle it actively in the counseling process. So, as a mental health professional, that's how I see this. and also to be kind to ourselves, to be loving with ourselves, to remember that we have worth, that we are beautiful, that we are competent, that we are gifted, and that we have so much to share and so much to offer to the world beyond our skin tone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Devana. Now, is there a way that people might be able to reach out to you?
Yes, my practice is the Couples Institute of Northeast Georgia. The, the website is out there if you Google Couples Institute. I can also be reached at DMS, that's Delta Michael Sierra, dot LPC at gmail.com.
Okay. And you said it's the Couples Institute of Northeast Georgia?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to make sure I put that in the chat. Is that, oh, I found it. The Couples Institute of Northeast Georgia is Clinicians of Color. No.
Oh, that's probably one of my profiles.
Oh, yeah. I found it. The Couples Institute. Okay. So as I'm typing it in the chat, let's go ahead and move over to Miss Sharon.
So I second everything that's been said before me. I say take some time to do your own work. Sometimes it can be easy to let me help the next person along on their journey and then we're still stuck where we're at. So personally, I'm all about doing my own work, seeing how I've been impacted by various experiences and give myself the space to, do what I need to do for myself. Then also been reaching out and supporting and helping others, extremely important. I'm a strong component of extending yourself grace. I'm all about extending myself grace. So that means that I don't shame myself and I don't allow anyone else to shame me either. I've got clients and we talk about grace and they're like, what? You're not talking about God? Yeah, I'm all about God, extending that grace I receive from God. But I'm about extending that grace to myself. So that means you can't shame me and I don't shame myself either. Once I picked that thing up, it just answered and it filled in so many different spaces. And it doesn't matter if you're my parent or my child or an institution, you can't shame me. Um, Now, I may experience a little bit of guilt from time to time, which it can be healthy. Like Sharon, seriously, do better, and I'll work to do that. But I'm not about shame, and a lot of things that we've been talking about are shame based. And once we get a hold of that thing, life changes. So I can be found at lovethatrelationship.com. And then my books are on the site as well, lovethatrelationship.com/shop. Yeah, I've got other great books coming out as well. I'm all about helping the little people. Why in the world do they have to wait till they get, you know, uh, my child will be 30 tomorrow, but why do they have to wait until they're 30, they're 50, they're whatever to get to this healthier place? No, let's be proactive. So let's have lots of conversations in which I'm all about it. Having the conversations with the little people because that's when we learn. It's like, oh, things have changed. But yeah, I can't just stay stuck where I'm at. So lots of conversations and keeping it going.
I'm gonna assume it's me because you were muted.
Oh, that was my fault. I forgot I muted myself. I said, thank you so much, Ms. Sharon. And I'll move over to Dr. Jackie.
Okay, that's what happens when you know good at reading lips because of church. Um, Everyone has said what I was going to say, so I think I will just add to something I tell my clients is that when you have a thought, before you accept it, see if it's true or not true, because sometimes thoughts aren't always true, and sometimes our feelings lie. So always question what you think and what you feel, especially when it comes by yourself, because you probably learned that from somewhere. And we talked about research. Number one rule of research is to check your sources. So check to see if that influence of your thought or your emotion actually has the validity to tell you how to think and how to feel. So that's my one thing to do. Because everyone else said everything else. So I was like, well, I guess that's all I got. But you can find me at my website at www.drjdarby.com or follow my Instagram at The Unconscious Shift, where we're helping to build a community of wellness so that you can do the work and have the environment to continue to thrive and do the work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And then we will end it with Miss Frenchie.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Darby, so my theoretical orientation is CBT, cognitive behavioral, right? And so what I will say is this: if you change the way you think, it'll change the way you feel, and it'll then show up in your life, and it'll change the way you behave. The other day I had a sweatshirt on that says secure yourself, sis. If we were all self-secure, what harmony we would live in, right? And so it ties back to that doing the work, right? Knowing your worth, building your self-confidence, your self-efficacy, because when you are secure in yourself, no one is more beautiful than you, right? We're all beautiful. And I will also say that we have to be aware and cognizant of how we speak to each other, how we talk about each other. We all carry beauty in some way. So we got to be mindful of, even simple conversations. And I'm going to use this as an example. I hope nobody gets offended. But when we say, oh, she's light skinned, but she ain't that cute, or she's dark skinned and she ain't that cute, we really need to be mindful of these types of words and the rhetoric that we use, because it impacts how society continues to see us and how we see ourselves. So I will just end on the note: secure yourself, sis, so that you can see the beauty within you and you can see the beauty within the other women that surround you, regardless of color.
Amen. 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 Now, Frenchie, what is your website?
So I have Facebook and Instagram, and it's just my name, at Frenchie Jones. And that's all that I have now. I do have a podcast called Don't Pardon My French. I'm rebranding that podcast right now, but we take issues that arise in entertainment and we tie them back to our generational trauma, and it has a mental health wellness kind of spin on it. And so I'm rebranding that podcast. And once I rebrand it, if you guys follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, I hope to continue to have these types of courageous conversations that are culturally sound and competent.
Well, thank you so much, Frenchie. And to add to that, saying you're pretty for a black girl or you're pretty for a light-skinned girl, that's not good either. So that's what we call a backhanded compliment. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you all for sharing your insight on this topic. I hope that somebody was blessed by something that was said tonight. We had a lot of great discussion in the chat, so thank you all for listening in and making this a really interactive conversation. Miss Joyce, I think she had to run, but I want to thank her for sharing her thoughts as well, because we do know that this can be a really hurtful topic. But if we can approach it in love the way we did tonight, I believe that we can actually break down some barriers. So thank you once again. Please make sure you reach out to all of the ladies who are on the chat. And this is the new standard for Horizons. I used to call it Horizons on IG. Now it's just called Horizons Live. So next week's show, we're going to have 2 new guests who are going to be talking about their books, and it's going to happen right here on StreamYard. So thank you, StreamYard, for helping me to elevate the show. Thank you for helping me to make this an awesome conversation, a great conversation with so many wonderful ladies. And thanks for giving me the chance to reconnect with all of you, because some of you I just met and some of you I haven't seen in a long time. But I'm going to tell you, I just really love this conversation. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to the audience. You can follow Meet the World Image Solutions at www.mtwimagesolutions.com. And I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. So we'll be putting some clips of today's chat inside of TikTok and Instagram a little bit later. And just reach out to me, because I'm looking to help some people, some business owners, to write their first book. And I would love for you all to be one of those business owners. So talk with me and let's have a conversation. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you once again. You guys have a wonderful evening. God bless you.